Hello and welcome, everyone. The world is in turmoil after Trump's Liberation Day. We have seen the most massive losses in the stock markets, in the US markets, but internationally too, since a very long time, since the beginning of COVID, over the last 2 days. And now at the weekend, everyone is asking themselves, what the hell is going on? After a lot of analysis over the last 48 hours, I figured out the exact plan of Trump. And I will give it to you right now and then jump deeper into why that is. We can actually be sure at this point that Trump's strategy here is to levy a 10% across the board tariff on everyone. That is the end state. That is the desired end state of Trump. 10% on everything that comes into the United States with no exceptions. This baseline tariff is intended to protect the United States labor force, to bring back manufacturing, and this is what's truly debated in economics. Is that smart or not? I think from an American point of view, it is. But that is not what makes the world nervous right now. What makes the world nervous is these huge tariffs on top of it. China at 54%. The European Union at much more than 10%, depending on the country. What about these? We can now be sure, very sure, and we'll go into that in a second, where I share an exclusive interview on Bloomberg of the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, who actually explains this in detail. We can now be sure that all of that is negotiation leverage. Now, does it mean it goes away right away? No, it doesn't mean that. Does it mean it goes away eventually? No, it doesn't mean that. It's a negotiation. If Trump does not get what he wants, a lot of these tariffs will stay in place. But there's reason to believe that no country can sustain keeping these tariffs at the levels they are right now and being implemented on April 5th and 9th. So I will explain to you why I came to this conclusion, and all we need to do is look at what the second in command, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, the one guy who knows more about tariffs than anyone else with the exception of Donald Trump, actually says about that. Let's go into the interview and see why we can be sure about what I just said.
Right now want to understand what they can do between now and then to avoid those tariffs. What do they need to do? Have you communicated any metrics to them whatsoever?
Hey, creating these videos is a lot of work. Please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Now let's get back to the video.
We've been talking to the trade ministers of the major trading partners for more than a month, and we've been talking to them. And so you have to understand. And
so this is the first thing. I will comment on this while we listen to it. He says, look, he was asked, can they do anything? What do they have to do to bring down these tariffs? If these tariffs were intended to actually stay there forever, he would say they can do nothing. We want these tariffs in. There's nothing to do. He says instead, we have been talking to all these guys, to all the ministers, all the trade ministers for over a month now. So clearly, this is all about negotiation.
Tariffs are easy to understand, right? We have a 2.5% tariff on autos, and Europe has a 10% tariff, and other people have a 20% or 15% tariff. And that's sort of easy, so they can all come down. But it's the non-tariff trade barriers that are the difference. Some countries have a VAT, and they take that VAT tax of 20% and they use it to subsidize the production of their domestic industries. That's why we can't sell cars there, because they give a rebate. Either they give it directly. One country told me yesterday that they give it directly to their car manufacturer to make their cars cheaper. That's why they sell successfully and we don't. Others take the money and use it and give cheap energy costs to this production. And that's why the steel industry, why is everybody else so good at steel and we're not? It's because their governments subsidize it. So we really need to change the way trade works around the world. It's tariffs, but don't get confused that these non-tariff trade barriers, they are the monster that needs to be slayed.
You've been consistent about this argument: subsidized production, manipulated currencies, foreign trade barriers, something the president addressed just last night. Can we just sit on the numbers just for a moment? The EU, 20%, 24% on Japan, 34% on China. Just what exactly was the methodology to go through all those different barriers to entry that you want to knock down? How did you come up with these numbers?
Well, the Council of Economic Advisors, you know, the PhD economists of the administration, coupled with USTR, the United States Trade Representative, they publish a book called Trade Barriers, about this thick, right? And they've been analyzing for decades all of these different tools that these other economies use to hurt America, right? They won't take our corn in India. They won't take our beef almost anywhere. It's unbelievable. They won't take our agricultural products. They just treat us badly because we've allowed them to treat us badly. And when you finally go back at them and say, this has got to end, it's going to be tough for them because they've built.
This was also extremely important to watch. The guy on Bloomberg asked Secretary Lutnik, okay, can you explain how you arrived at these numbers? Now, Lutnik actually in the beginning explained, I didn't share that, but he explained, well, it's the trade deficit. It's a percentage. The trade deficit to the United States is a percentage. We said that's the tariff barriers. There was a lot of mockery on X and saying, how stupid is this administration? This has nothing to do with tariffs. Lutnik skips this whole thing and says, let's stop playing games here. Of course, this is not about tariffs. This is about the cost imposed on America. And that cost is the trade imbalance. And this trade imbalance is not okay. And we want to have it dismantled. Not specifically the trade imbalance, but the unfairness in trade. And Lutnik clearly verbalized what that unfairness and imbalance is. It is tariffs of other countries on United States goods, which is true, but he said that's marginal. He said the monster that has to be slayed are all the unfair trade practices that are not tariffs. For example, the European Union charging VAT, huge VAT, 22% as a tariff on US cars, and says, well, that's just value-added tax, that's not a tariff. Well, who cares? You have to pay it. The European Union or some countries there take that money that they get from American exporters and give it directly to their car companies as a subsidy. So you can't compete with that, obviously. And that's not a tariff, but it's hugely unfair, absolute anti-free market behavior. And then there are also clear bans on certain things. So of course, if you go into a negotiation like that without any leverage, the Europeans, the Chinese, the Vietnamese, Thailand, everyone, Vietnam, they're just going to ignore you and say, oh, sure, but it's so complicated. We can't change our regulations. Oh, we can't do this, we can't do that. And so Trump has had it and said, well, guess what? Then you get a giant, big, fat tariff on everything and your economy will crumble. Now, he doesn't want them to crumble. And Lutnik is going to go into that in a minute. And he will talk about China as the prime example of everything. And this is one of the most interesting things he's going to explain to us that conveys very clearly that this is all about negotiation outside the 10% base tariff that Trump actually wants on everyone. So here's what Lutnik has to say about China. So here is China.
I make sense of this in real time, and you've got the numbers. What's the tariff on China now? The complete tariff, including everything. What is that number now?
Well, there was a 20% tariff because they continue to make the ingredients for fentanyl and send them out, right? And those ingredients have the highest subsidy rate in China, meaning the Chinese government is paying these factories to make these goods, the ingredients for fentanyl, which is killing Americans, right? So Donald Trump put a 20% tariff on that, and now the regular trade deficit number, right, the analysis by the Council of Economic Advisors and the United States Trade Representative, we have a 34% tariff, so it's 54%. But when they stop making the ingredients for fentanyl, and I want to point out in 2019, President Xi told President Trump that he would put the death penalty on anyone who made fentanyl. And now he's actually subsidizing them. And that's just so wrong that Donald Trump is just, he's not going to stand for it. And
so when we talk about these 54% tariffs on China, 34 just issued at Liberation Day and 20% before, you can already tell the purpose here is not to do that. The purpose is to make China stop sending fentanyl to the United States. There was a promise by Xi, as you just heard, in 2019 to stop and put a death penalty on it. Instead of doing that, she decided to subsidize, to give government money to the people who generate the most deadly drug that goes to the United States illegally. Trump says, stop it, just stop it. And he wants, he put a 20% tariff on that in his first term, and she just doesn't do it. So Trump now says, well, guess what? We are putting 34% on top of that. And these 34%, as Lutnik elaborated before, are based on other trade imbalances and unfairnesses that are happening in China towards American goods, all kinds of import restrictions and all kinds of problems. And I was in China. I know there's a lot of problems. I know you can't do much as an American company. So why is this important for us? Because it shows that the intent is not to have a 54% tax on China or tariff. The intent is to have a 10% tariff on China and bring that all down. But in order to do so, China has to do certain things, and China will have to do these things. Let's keep listening.
Sure, but they've got to stop
the
fentanyl.
UAE.
All they have to have is a phone call. All they have to have is a phone call from President Xi to President Trump saying, I'm going to end fentanyl production that's killing Americans.
And you can tell his frustration here, by the way. You can tell Lutnik's frustration. He says, why is it so hard to get a reduction of 20% on all Chinese goods exported to the United States? Why is it so hard to pick up the phone and say, I'm going to stop fentanyl subsidies or fentanyl ingredient subsidies? I mean, how big, what's the share of the Chinese economy that is fentanyl ingredient subsidies? Probably not too much. Maybe it's big, but it's definitely not as big as 20% on exports. So what's so hard about this? And clearly Lutnik thinks this is ridiculous. And you can tell here behind the scenes, this gives away a little bit the behind the scenes sentiment that there is tremendous negotiation going on all the time. That's why Lutnik is slightly annoyed by the Chinese.
And it drops 20%. I mean, that's a pretty inexpensive phone call, but you have to make the decision. You got to stop killing Americans. And so far, they haven't made that decision. Shocking. But they
So why is this so important? Because the sentiment on Wall Street is a little bit, oh my God, we are not sure what these tariffs mean. Is Trump serious about these tariffs? Is he serious? Maybe the whole administration wants these tariffs. Maybe they have gone nuts. Maybe they have gone crazy and the world is ending. We sell our stocks. We have to stop investing because this might be the end of the world. Here, we are getting a 100% clear signal. No, these tariffs are not seriously intended to stay. 100% not. What is intended to stay is a 10% base tariffs on everyone once we have fair trade. For every country where there's no fair trade, where there are unfair trade practices, there's additional tariffs on top of the 10% to beat down these unfair trade practices. And that is a question of negotiation.
got to think about that for a minute. Think about that for a minute. A phone call would save them 20% on all their products, but they'd have to stop making the ingredients of fentanyl, and they refuse. Outrageous.
Has your counterpart reached out to set up that phone call between President Trump and Xi Jinping?
Yesterday.
You'll accept it takes time to engineer a supply-side response, though, sir. And in the meantime, you can see bad things happen. Do you accept that?
Well, what I can accept, of course, it takes time to build factories, but companies understand how to do it. They will do it. The United States of America is the greatest economy in the world. People have to do business with it. The rest of the world will bring down their trade barriers, and you'll see a great resurgence in our ability to sell agriculture overseas. You'll see factories being built here, and that factory production will be faster.
So again, he also re-emphasizes here that they're aiming for a fast reduction of trade barriers, meaning a fast reduction of US tariffs. He clearly hinted that here, that he does not expect this to stay for too long. But he also says, of course, there will be tariffs in place.
So sure, there will be a rebalancing of those who make things in cheap labor markets, figuring out how to make them here. But ultimately speaking, and I think in much less time than you think, the world will reorder itself, will figure it out, and the United States growth rate will turbocharge compared to the rest of the world.
Secretary, just a final question, if we may. Any calls scheduled for today with the Europeans? Do those negotiations start this morning immediately? Can you give us a sense of things?
Absolutely. Our teams are talking to all the great trading partners today, and we are available for our great trading partners every day. It is time for them to do deep soul searching of how they treat us poorly and how to make it right. It is time for them to do that. That is going to be difficult for them because they've taken advantage of us for so long. They should just be disappointed that the free ride is over. It's time for them to be realistic and to change the way they look at the United States of America. And I think that's going to happen starting today.
So there you have it. There you have it. That is the take of Secretary Lutnick on the whole situation. And you know, when you just summarize this, you can look up the Bloomberg interview with him. I think it's a very, very insightful interview. It's long. It's like 22 minutes or something. But when you look at that, it is very, very clear that what I said in the beginning is exactly the right analysis here. You have 3 layers of these tariffs, right? You have the first layer, which is a new 10% layer that are general tariffs for everyone who wants to do business with the United States. That is the only controversial and strategically important new policy of Trump. Everything above that, the next layer is specific penalties, like the fentanyl penalty, where there is one specific thing that Trump wants from that country that they have to stop doing. It's fentanyl for Mexico, Canada, and China, where China has refused to take action. It's a very simple and clear ask. They have to do it or they will get stuck with their 20%. And then on top of that, the tariffs that are derived from unfair trade practices. And you can be guaranteed that every single country and region that now has a tariff put on them by Trump has a very specific list of demands that is being right now, probably as we speak, today, tomorrow, yesterday, being negotiated and discussed, that was already made completely transparent to these trading partners months and months ago, probably years ago, that they exactly know. And as Lutnik also said in this interview, they know all of that stuff. It's all gamesmanship in the media. Behind the scenes, everyone is crystal clear what's going on. They know what they're doing wrong under, the perspective of the United States. I'm sure the trading partners also have complaints about specific unfair trade practices of the United States, but it's an asymmetry because I think Trump is fundamentally right that the United States is the country that's mostly being ripped off by the other countries. It's not the other way around. That doesn't mean the United States doesn't distort their market here and there. And I think it's totally legitimate for the trading partners to bring that up, this specific distortion, and have a negotiation. This was a clear invitation, not just invitation. There is no invitation needed. These people are sitting there and negotiating as we speak. All of that lets me conclude the market is absolutely overreacting. The world has no choice but to negotiate. Trump wants to negotiate. And these negotiations are already pretty progressed because the demands of the United States are crystal clear in front of everyone. They have already thought it all through. They probably all have already options on the table. And now it's just a question, who's doing what? So that's why I said it's phony, the market sell-off. After this analysis, I'm 100% sure this will be resolved and there is a master plan. And what I just explained is the master plan. So I hope you enjoyed that. Stay tuned, subscribe and like, and see you very soon.